You have bought Bitcoin at the bottom as well as toward the top. And so I'm just curious from your own experience, what lessons can you share from all of your experience with risk management?
Well, I think one of the lessons is you have to separate your P&L from your balance sheet. So if the way that you're making money is and Ross's letter, he points out that they make money with 10 different strategies. One of them is Bitcoin. The other 9 strategies are firmly grounded in the conventional economy of the world. So if you're a doctor, you stay a doctor, you're the best doctor you can be, you serve your patients the best, and you maximize your income as a doctor. And then on your balance sheet, you have assets, and on your balance sheet you would have a variety of assets. Whatever property you're going to hold for a long period of time, you could have a diversified portfolio of property, of digital property like Bitcoin, and you might very well hold real estate, and you might own a share in a company, right? But separate your balance sheet from your P&L. At MicroStrategy, we have a traditional enterprise software company, and we keep 99% of our employees focused upon that business, which generates substantial cash flows. And that's what allows us to pursue our Bitcoin strategy by sweeping those cash flows into Bitcoin in a form of corporate dollar cost averaging. I think where things get dangerous, which is what happened with FTX, is all of a sudden the way they make money is also their balance sheet strategy. Yeah. And if you're going to have a balance sheet with a bunch of FTT token, and then you're going to use it as collateral to borrow against it to generate yield, when the token collapses, the P&L collapses, and vice versa, and the entire thing becomes a house of cards.
Seems so obvious too.
Hindsight is always 20/20, and then of course, to the extent that you actually take on any debt, you generally want to take debt that is secured against assets that don't get marked to market. Like the best form of debt is I have a mortgage against a house, and the bank's not going to show up at my door and value my house down by 80% on Monday and then ask me to repay the mortgage on Tuesday. Right? But, use common sense, right? If you were to borrow against a stock, like a liquid asset like Apple stock or S&P index, or even against Bitcoin, you want to be ready for 80% drawdown. And most conventional risk managers, they would, for example, they would never advance more than 50% loan to value. And then when you get close to that, you would think, okay, well, now I got to be ready for a 50% drop from here. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a very conservative view, right, on liquid assets, you would say you never want to go beyond 20% loan to value on a liquid asset, even if you think it's rock solid. Of course, if you're borrowing against a token printed out of thin air, right, like FTT, well, that can go to zero overnight because there's nothing backing it. So I think be conservative with the way that you use debt. Be rational and thoughtful in how you distribute your balance sheet. And then on the P&L side, figure out what it is you can do that is making a unique contribution to the world. And if you're the world's best bakery on this city block, that's what you do. And if you're a doctor or a dentist, that's what you do. And just make sure you do that thing. And if you're in a currency like a very weak developing nation currency where it's collapsing at 100%, 100% inflation a year or more, you're sweeping your local proceeds, into a combination of dollars that you're going to hold for 12 months, and then Bitcoin that you're going to hold for 12 years, right? And if you think in terms of your long-range asset, your short-range asset, and your immediate currency, then I think you'll probably be in good stead.
It seems to so many of us that a lot of your purpose now has to do with Bitcoin education. Is there anything that keeps you up at night?
I think we need to educate a lot more people. What keeps me up at night is that there are so many mainstream influencers, so many policy makers, so many investors and money managers that still don't understand half an hour or an hour worth of Bitcoin fundamentals. But the world is still full of incredible numbers of people at every level, from the top ranks of our government to leaders, captains of industry, down to rank and file. The world's full of people that don't understand the theory of money. They don't understand what money is, right? They would say, oh, money is a medium of exchange. Okay, so therefore I guess the peso is just as good as the dollar, is just as good as Bitcoin, just, because they're all just mediums of exchange to somebody, right? And so the lack of awareness of the theory of money, that's something that keeps you up at night. The world is full of people that don't understand the power of an open, permissionless monetary network, right? The fact that you can move $1 million from here to Africa and you could do it in an open rail, and then you could do it 1 million times cheaper than the conventional 20th century banking system, and you could do it 1 million times better, and then you could program it 1 million times faster. So most people, they don't realize that money is technology. They don't really understand what true non-defective money is, because every monetary system in the history of the world has collapsed, and every money that's ever been invented before Bitcoin was objectively defective mathematically and physically. And so because people don't have that fundamental understanding of the physics of money, and they don't understand that money is technology, they're not looking for the solution. They have this massive blind spot. But they do have power, right? The world is full of people with money, with power, and with influence that are ignorant of these two basic principles. And the first principle explains to you why you would want to own Bitcoin. And the second principle explains to you why the future is 8 billion people with devices plugging in via the Lightning protocol to each other to trade and to run the economy of the 21st century. So we have to go and educate those leaders so that they embrace and adopt this physically perfected money and this ethical open network.
We're witnessing now a change of the guard more than anything else. It's more than we see it. We see it as late stage fiat was mentioned in today's show. The U.S. dollar is losing its dominance, and just we could see it on so many levels with with China getting buddy with India, Saudi Arabia, Russia. It's inevitable that the U.S. dollar will just lose its world reserve currency status. And as we move forward, that more people adopt Bitcoin, more countries adopt Bitcoin, more companies adopt Bitcoin, it could be used then as a currency moving forward too. So when it comes to a point when fiat collapses, what do you do at that point? How do you function? Well, Bitcoin could potentially fill the void in that regard, because you will have a lot more opportunities to actually spend it and to use it for buying goods and services. So it will be in a really good position to do so. I think that something else to consider too, Bitcoin, it came at the perfect time. If it came 10 years too early, it would have never been adopted. If it came 10 years too late, it would have been too late. It was at the exact perfect time where you had, after the 2008 economic collapse, you had people that have computers in their pockets, and you're able to essentially transact. Maybe not at the onset of Bitcoin, but all this would happen at the right time. And it's like lightning in a bottle. And this can never have been predicted and cannot be replicated. It's just absolutely perfect timing.
Okay, so here's our plan. In the coming weeks, the House will vote on a bill to lift the debt ceiling into the next year. Save taxpayers trillions of dollars, make us less dependent upon China, curb our high inflation, all without touching Social Security and Medicare. Simply put, it puts it on a fiscal responsible path in 3 ways. It limits, it saves, and it grows. I'm here to tell you, I want a responsible, sensible debt ceiling. It puts us on an economic path to make America stronger. It works for every American. But that cannot happen if the president continues to ignore the problem. And he can't continue any longer. The day is coming. I do not want to see this president bumble in to a default. I want to sit down and solve the problem together.
Every time you see a new wave of monetary stimulus, there is a new wave of money chasing wealth preservation, essentially. And this chase causes assets to inflate, and people without assets get further priced out of the economy. So every time there's about a monetary stimulus, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, because if you don't have assets, you're not taking advantage of those.
Hyperinflations are pretty horrible and terrible, and the wars that fiat currency funds are pretty horrible and terrible. There were 169 million people murdered in the 20th century by states, fiat-funded states. I'll say that again. They call it democide. It's such a huge tragedy, they gave it its own name. 169 million people murdered in the 20th century by fiat-funded states. I think this is the number one problem we face as a species, is this element of coercion, compulsion, violence.
And so you think that a Bitcoin standard is inevitable, is that correct?
I don't believe in the word inevitable. I call it an unstoppable vortex of positive incentives. It's probably one of the best phrases I've found for it. It's incentivizing everyone to contribute to the proliferation and success of its network. That's how it works, basically. It's ingenious. So if we don't destroy ourselves by fiat first, then I think Bitcoin has a very high likelihood of success.
Would you rather have £100 or one Bitcoin?
One Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'd rather have a Bitcoin.
One Bitcoin, probably.
One Bitcoin.
One Bitcoin. Take the Bitcoin.
I'll go for the Bitcoin today.
£100, mate. Bitcoin's going to tank. There's no need to be invested in crypto at the moment. I'm telling you.
What about £1,000 or one Bitcoin?
50 grand. Probably one Bitcoin.
Still a Bitcoin.
What about £10,000 or one Bitcoin?
I'll take the Bitcoin.
£10,000. Invest half of it in half of Bitcoin. I think I might still go with the Bitcoin.
What about 20,000?
£20,000.
20,000.
Knowing what I know, one Bitcoin.
One Bitcoin.
And what do you know?
That one Bitcoin is worth, how much did you say?
I didn't tell you I didn't say
What are the last?
But I think it actually is really simple. And, you know, a lot of people are wondering what to do. And it's like, have a family, get out of the cities and make money.
Get the chickens.
Yeah, man. Be more self-sufficient. Allocate your money properly. I can hear Max Kaiser screaming, buy Bitcoin.
Move to El Salvador.
I don't know about moving to El Salvador.
That's what Max wants.
Me personally, though, I think crypto is another venue. If everybody listening to this show 12 years ago bought Bitcoin, the culture war would be over. Because you would have millions of Bitcoin millionaires controlling industry and snapping their fingers and just doing whatever they want.
I think a lot of it is an example of how little faith people have in the US dollar. That's why crypto's doing so well.
The hold is like you're supposed to periodically, or this is what they say, every week or so often you put money into Bitcoin, like you put a small percentage in, because it's where you save a store of value. And then, like with any investment, you take only a little bit out. So you're putting more and then you're taking out, but it's because the value is increasing.
Okay.
So this is the theory. I'm not telling anybody to do anything. I don't give financial advice. But I'll say this. I invested in Bitcoin several years ago, and, it's like 20 times up.
I'll say Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert, who are in El Salvador, which has adopted Bitcoin as its national currency, are like partying like it is like 1999 Prince style. Like they are on top of the world with joy every day. They live in joy.
Well, El Salvador's crime rate has collapsed. Yes. The standard of living has skyrocketed. What the president has done down there with Bitcoin has revolutionized this country for the better. And now people want to live there because I think they're saying now it is the lowest crime in Central America. It used to have some of the highest crime. And then the media got mad. They started arresting all of these cartel and gang members. I'm like, dude, he is revolutionizing that country for the better. And I'm like, Luke is telling me to get property down there to create like a hub so we can go down periodically. And I'm like,
does Luke have property there?
And not a bad idea. It's getting expensive though, because
now everybody's
it's getting nice.
The words El Salvador translates to the savior.
Wow.
El Salvador.
Is that really what that means?
Yeah, the savior.
Whoa. I think we got to set up like a Timcast.
The saving. the savior either.
Get like an office down there and set up a studio so that we can periodically go down and do shows.
Be cool.
Yeah. What I want to say to people is what I think Bitcoin is a silent revolution. And I love that thought because it helps us in the fight against surveillance and always more and more tightening privacy rights. And if you are supporting Bitcoin just by using it, either holding it or using it for day-to-day things in a circular economy, then you support freedom fighters and human rights activists. You support the people in these countries from here just by holding Bitcoin. And if you are anti-Bitcoin, you are anti-privacy, you are anti-freedom of speech, and you're against the fact that there are 4 billion people who should also get fair access to an open monetary system. And I think these are important things. And we are in a new crypto war. Like in the 90s, you know, the cryptography was banned by the US. They said cryptography is like munition. And there's the story of Adam Back, who wrote a privacy tool and printed it on a T-shirt to show the authorities you can't ban mathematics and cryptography. And like recently with the crackdown on Tornado Cash, I saw this quote again from Phil Zimmermann, the inventor of PGP, public-private cryptography.
Pretty good privacy.
Yeah, pretty good. Thank you very much for email encryption. And he said, if privacy is outlawed, only outlaws will have privacy. And I don't want to live in a world like that. So what I think is important to say is all of that, what I just said. Bitcoin is uncensorable, it's unstoppable. And I think it gets the most meaning and value if you use it and not only hold it. I'm not saying anything against speculation or store of value. It's an important part of Bitcoin. But I think circular economies will help Bitcoin adoption much more in these countries where I was talking about than all the hodling of the people in Western countries.
My name is Pierre Rochard. I'm the Vice President of Research at Riot Platforms, the largest publicly traded Bitcoin miner in the United States, with our facility in Milam County, close to Rockdale. I'm a first-generation immigrant, and I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a bachelor and master accounting degree. Thank you, Senator Kolkhorst, for your work on demand response issues. I believe that the witnesses here have adequately represented our views on demand response. I would just add that there is already a 60% limit to prevent concentration in demand response programs, and that this bill would override ERCOT's long-term study on large flexible loads. With regards to Chapter 312 temporary county tax abatements, these abatements have helped attract Bitcoin miners to Texas, and they've created hundreds of rural jobs. Bitcoin miners are the #1 employer in Rockdale. Bitcoin miners are also the #1 taxpayer to Rockdale ISD. Bitcoin mining is good for rural education. Milam County has record sales tax revenue thanks to Bitcoin miners. Even if you are skeptical of Bitcoin, these abatements have been highly effective at revitalizing rural communities. It is also in our national security interest to mine more Bitcoin here in the United States and take market share away from foreign adversaries like Russia and China. We should not add unnecessary regulatory burdens or raise taxes on this strategic and innovative industry. For these reasons, I recommend to vote against SB 1751. Bitcoin is freedom money. It empowers people so that they can earn, save, and spend their money without relying on or trusting government central banks. Thank you.
Mr. Richard, any questions?
I have one quick. I think Bitcoin is it's not going to change everything, but it's going to change a lot of the incentives around government. So I see governments are going to have to change the way they treat citizens. Instead of citizens just being like tax cows that get milked for the government, they're going to actually have to start treating us like customers. And I see governments all around the world trying to compete for intellectual capital and the smartest minds around the world by lowering their tax rates.
In Mexico, 67 million people are not included in our financial system.
Bitcoin is the answer to solve this problem. Through financial inclusion and financial education, the Mexican people can have a better quality of life, and we can reduce social inequality around the country. Therefore, we have already been submitting bills to guarantee financial inclusion and financial education as a constitutional right for our population, for our freedom.
Here's the phrase I use to capture it all. Inflation is legalized counterfeiting. Counterfeiting is criminalized inflation. It's the same thing. It's just a matter of which direction the guns are pointed, right? Either you can do the counterfeiting or you get attacked for doing the counterfeiting. The same crime that George Floyd was basically murdered for, the counterfeit $20 bill, is the same activity the Federal Reserve perpetrates by the trillion. There's literally no difference other than who is legally authorized to do it and who's not. And yeah, currency counterfeiting or inflation in general is just a violation of property rights ultimately, because you're moving wealth from the hands of those depending on dollars to hold their value into the hands of those who own dollar-denominated assets or receive the newly printed money.
Before Bitcoin, money was administered by kleptocratic lizards we call cantillionaires. At the end of their reign, they primarily consisted of fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
But do you sleep at night when you see this? Of course I have to sleep at night. I have to worry every morning.
I feel like today, people like myself, we have actually the means and the power to fight. And there has never been a time in the world actually like that until Bitcoin came in 2008. Everything is possible actually, because money is everything.
When Fodé Diop was a high school senior growing up in Senegal, he was accepted to Emporia State University in Kansas to study engineering and to play basketball. But before enrolling, the value of the tuition money his father had set aside was cut in half overnight because of a backroom deal spearheaded by the International Monetary Fund and the French government.
So all the money that my dad saved for me to basically go to college overnight was worth 50% less.
That experience is what led to Diop's current career as a software developer working to make Bitcoin easy to use as a medium of exchange for anyone in Senegal with a smartphone.
Bitcoin is not controlled by anybody. Nobody can come overnight and say that now it's worth this much, or 50% less, or 40% less. So if you're in a country where maybe your money might be devalued on the whim of other nations interfering with the local economy, storing your money in Bitcoin might be a better deal for you in the future to preserve your wealth and preserve your value.
So it's providing a parallel store of value,
Exactly.
and a superior one that is not going to be the whim of the French government, the U.S.
Exactly.
government, the Senegalese
That's right.
government.
Senegal has been subject to monetary colonialism since 1945, when France ratified the Bretton Woods Agreement, which gave it control over the currency of 14 African nations. On the morning of January 11, 1994, the CFA franc, or CFA, was pegged to the French franc at a valuation of 1 to 50. The following day, it was cut to 1 to 100 after the French government gave in to pressure from the International Monetary Fund and World Bank to devalue the currency. Not only did this temporarily crush Diop's college dreams, it also led to widespread political unrest, as West Africa's subsistence farmers could no longer afford to import essential goods, including drugs to treat malaria.
It was really a big uproar, like for these African countries. But the local people really found themselves pretty much robbed, because your purchasing power overnight was worth half.
The cruel irony was that the economic fate of millions of Senegalese was completely out of their own hands. Writes the Human Rights Foundation's Alex Gladstein, no amount of protests could overthrow their economic masters.
I went to the embassy, I got rejected. They say actually I didn't have enough money. And I was like really heartbroken.
Diop's father was eventually able to pull together the money, and Diop got to attend college after all. After graduating, he came across a video featuring a Senegalese scientist and historian who criticized the French African monetary system.
At this time, I wasn't actually very conscious about what really happened.
Diop says it was the first of 3 awakenings that set him on his current career path.
Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything.
The next was Steve Jobs' famous 2007 announcement of the iPhone, which ultimately led him to consider how poorly traditional banks serve the citizens of Senegal.
Everywhere you go in downtown, there's a bank at every corner. Bank of Africa, bank of this, bank of that, bank of whatever, right? And for me, I can't help but wonder, is that with so many banks here, how come we have the lowest number of banked people in the world? Who are these banks serving? The people who actually live in these remote areas have to pretty much travel about 2 to 4 hours just to go inside a bank.
Jobs' handheld computer created an opportunity to circumvent these institutions altogether.
My vision of the future is that ultimately your bank account is going to become pretty much your cell phone device.
But Jobs' revolutionary new communication device needed a decentralized monetary system to match, which is where Bitcoin comes in. Reading Satoshi Nakamoto's groundbreaking 2008 paper led to Diop's third awakening.
When I read the white paper, they said, okay, well, this is a weapon for us to fight oppression.
But the Bitcoin network alone isn't well suited to becoming a medium of exchange for everyday purchases in Senegal or anywhere else. That's because it currently has the capacity to process only a handful of transactions per second, which is where the Bitcoin Lightning Network comes in.
So Bitcoin, for it to rival the likes of Visa and MasterCard, it would have to do upwards to like 20,000 transactions per second, or like maybe 25, even 25,000. Today, unfortunately, Bitcoin only does 7 to about 12 transactions per second. Lightning Network works like a bar tab. You go to the bar, you open up a tab, and you pretty much go back and forth and take as many transactions as you want, and then you settle your bill at the end of the night. So Bitcoin is a base layer, but unfortunately, it's not really fast, nor is it cheap. So basically what happens is you and I, we open up a channel, or like a Lightning Network channel, basically. We put some funds in there that we lock, and then we can transact as many times as we want, millions of times, basically. At the end of the month, we basically go settle on the Bitcoin layer itself, which is a little bit more expensive because, of course, it's the base layer. But Lightning-wise, our transactions will pretty much cost a fraction of a penny. So it's almost instant and almost free. And then at that point, we can rival the MasterCards and the Visas of the world.
With Bitcoin, the Lightning Network, and ubiquitous smartphones, Diop thinks it's possible to build a new free market monetary system that will finally liberate Senegal and other African countries from the last vestiges of colonialism.
I feel like maybe governments are still threatened, maybe. But to me, open source technology is just beautiful. And I believe actually that our work is so important that we have to do it no matter what the consequences are. So if we can leverage this technology to fight the oppressor, right? And technology, open source technology is actually what we need right now. And it's here. So why not use it?
That's the economy that we have. Like, we have this
100%.
fake ass economy, you know, like with fake muscles and fake everything. It's like, it's not real and we don't know what's going on. And, you know, coming back to the concept of consequences, it's like, you know, the person making the mistake is not paying for the mistake. And if we use an analogy, like if I was to jump off a cliff and you died instead of me, like, I'll just keep jumping off a cliff because someone else is dying for me. Like, it doesn't work like that in real life. And if economics,
yeah, it's a good point.
yeah, like if economics is not representative of real life, then you're actually not measuring real life. And then you have this sham of a game.